This is a really complex issue, and I think it's something that we are all going to grapple with till the end of time. But one thing I want to push back on is you use the word, how do we normalize? I think normalization is one of the norm is a four-letter word because the norm is what created these problems to begin with. This is what's right. This is what's different, right? So we're automatically othering people when we call something the norm. So I use the word ordinary. How do we make this ordinary for everybody? Okay, and I actually use ordinarilize rather than normalize, kind of from the similar syntactical perspective. But the question you asked about recommendations, what I typically do is I go to the standards, and I've audited state standards where I've lived, and I type in the word because this is what comes under in our class is the word diverse or diversity, right? So maybe it's reading standard 3.2.B.C, at 8:02 in the morning. I mean, those are really specific. And I use that as a lens to then say, well, this is what diversity, this is a word. Like, what does diversity mean? And it's a pushback actually on superintendents, on principals, on teachers and parents, because that term is there and it's not defined, right? It's not actually. So that's kind of our job, is to step in and say, I have leverage to really work within these terms. And so when I have students who are coming from conservative spaces, I often try to trouble that, and I'll use a text or some example to say, does it actually show images to say, does this person have any more rights than this person? Aren't we all allowed to be treated in the same way? Aren't we all entitled to human dignity? And it might have some pushback, but I think it also problematizes, like, why are you more important than this person? Now, if they say, because I'm heterosexual or I'm cisgender or I'm Christian or Catholic, why does that give you any more power than somebody else? And ultimately, we know it doesn't, but I think that it helps students really think about it. And I think also having examples from the media and drawing in examples around healthcare, welfare, the HUD, the ways in which people have been pushed back and not given the same opportunities. And with parents, it's the same thing. Like, I will always justify it through a standard. And again, I mean, sometimes that's the back door. And I hate to say it, but it's when you the trouble with social justice work is that we should just have work around justice. Okay. And when we say social justice, ultimately everybody has a voice, because we don't get to pick and choose, right? So I think my conservative kids have every right, because otherwise I'm positioning the left as the only people that get to have a voice, right? And then I'm not really being a justice-based educator. But the when you cross the line and someone experiences like physical, emotional, psychological oppression, that's when we're talking about injustice. Now, when you go to a conservative student and you say, well, are you really experiencing injustice when someone says, I'm allowed to be cisgender, trans or non-binary? Again, that's complicated, but I think that there's a troubling that can happen when you have those conversations.
I think that there's a place too for saying that school is probably a best of place as possible to bring up these conversations. I think sometimes they tend to be avoided because people don't like conflict, and they're worried about the political nature of everything it is that we do. Definitely brings it to the forefront. But I imagine that if you never brought up these things, that no one would, it would just get worse. People would become more radicalized.
I also think you could look at the hate crimes law. I think you can pull up the Gliston's reports and show the maps of where, and look at the actual laws around bullying and no bullying and cyberbullying, because I think all of those types of larger discourses are really powerful in the classroom.